What's up, guys? Today I'm just having some fun playing some 5 no limit on full tilt poker at 6 max. And for those who aren't familiar with 5 no limit, it refers to 2 cent, 5 cent. It's one of the lowest stakes games you can play online. Typically I play higher stakes, 25 no limit and higher, but for the purposes of this video, to try and teach new players how to approach the micro stakes, I figured I'd play this particular limit. So here I've been dealt pocket sevens in the cutoff and get 2 other callers. The flop comes down 5-2-5, which is a good flop for my hand. So I decide to go ahead and c-bet. And I actually get 2 other callers. I figure I've still got probably got the best hand. It is possible someone's got a 5, but it is a very small part of their range. And considering I knew that these players were on the loose side, I figured that they've probably got overcards. The player on the bottom was possibly calling with a hand like ace queen, or just floating the flop, trying to take away the pot on the turn. And I knew the other player who called in the blinds was a calling station, so I figured he just had 2 overcards in the spot that was trying to get lucky on the turn. So when the safe turn card comes, it is possible someone now has trips if they had a 2, but again, that's a small part of their range, and I want to bet again on the turn to protect my hand. And as it turned out, I took down the pot. So yeah, generally when I sit down at a table for the first time, one of the first things I want to do is try and profile the different players at the table. Obviously, if you've got a HUD like I do, I use Hold'em Manager. As you can see the stats for each opponent at the table. So if you're playing multiple tables, it's definitely handy when you're doing that, because obviously your attention and focus is divided between the number of tables you're playing. And once you sort of have quite a few hands on an opponent, you can start forming assumptions about their play based on how many hands they play and various other stats. And just by sort of simply observing the tables, it doesn't take too long to figure out, whether or not someone's a calling station, whether or not they're a good or a bad player, just based on certain things they do. Okay, so in this hand I've been dealt a suited connector in the big blind. The under the gun opens. There's 1 call, so I decide to call and see a check flop. It's a great hand to do that with, because when you hit the flop hard, versus an under the gun range, which is typically going to be fairly strong, when you hit the flop hard, you can typically win a fairly sizable pot, especially when the calling station also called and is never folding when he hits any kind of hand. Unfortunately, I completely missed, so I just got away from the hand. But generally, you don't actually, you want to play fairly straightforwardly. It's not necessary to, try and do lots of fancy plays and lots of bluffing, because most players, especially in the micro stakes, they're going to be fairly bad and not capable of folding. So against that type of opponent, you just want to try and make good hands and value bet them. Yeah, the general player types that you're going to encounter at 5 no limit and the micro stakes in general, you're going to have your fairly loose passive player, the fishy player that likes seeing flops. You also encounter your tight aggressive nits who basically just play fairly premium hands and play in a fairly straightforward manner. They may go for a c-bet when they've missed, but will give up on the turn. And generally won't apply too much pressure on you. And every now and then you'll also, especially at the short-handed tables, you can sometimes come across the loose aggressive players that like putting the pressure on, but it's fairly obvious whenever you encounter these type of players, and you can adjust your play accordingly. So here I've been dealt pocket 9s in the cutoff, which I go ahead and raise with. player in the big blind eventually gets around to calling. As I mentioned previously in the video, I knew he was a calling station from previous hands I've played against him. So the flop comes down 5-8-8, which is a great flop for my hand. I figure I've got the best hand and go ahead and c-bet. Now he could have a worse made hand, a draw, and a draw in this spot, or perhaps even calling with ace high, not believing me when I go ahead and c-bet. I decide to check the queen on the turn for pot control. It also allows him to, by doing so, it also allows him to bluff on the river any of his missed draws, and I can't really expect to get 3 streets of value from worse hands, so you've got to check 1 street, so I decided to check the turn. Okay, that basically wraps up this video. Hopefully you've learned something. Thanks guys.